How to brainwash people or how to avoid it. 7 steps. Brainwashing is a valuable tool for obtaining success. It is also a terrible restraint, and a majority of humans are victim to at least some level of brainwashing. Be it religious indoctrination, strong sense of nationalism for one's country, affiliation with a group, club, or school of thought that claims absolute authority or rightness. I cannot stress this enough, but people or organizations trying to be successful know these steps or methods. If you think someone is brainwashing you, they are not doing it accidentally. Brainwashing is extremely deliberate and can be nearly impossible to escape if you don't know you're brainwashed. Brainwashing does not work on accident. Other titles to this video could have been How to Start a Cult, How to Successfully Influence with Subliminal Messaging, Cultural Hypnosis, Seduction, Psychological Strategy. All of those are essentially the same thing, and though the steps will vary depending on who you ask, the general idea is universal: control. Knowing how brainwashing works is perhaps the best method in getting out of a brainwash. These steps are dual meaning. Anything that talks about how to brainwash is also how to see it in yourself or other people. I'll try to keep it simple, as things get very complex when you get to the level of brainwashing or someone who knows how to avoid it and techniques for that. It basically just gets really meta, but we'll start with these 7 basic steps or levels. So let's get started with step 1. Establish or recognize the first level of attraction: intrigue. There needs to be something about you that is both mysterious and interesting, a guarded part of you that people can look at but not touch, so to speak. You basically need to make yourself unpredictable but cool-headed. Appear larger than life and never get too close to people you want to brainwash. Distance is key. As soon as that attraction is established, step 2 must begin. For recognizing this first step, notice the body language of other people. Pay attention to facial expressions, especially the eyes. Look for subtle hand gestures, such as physical contact. Smiling and shoulder posture can be important clues as well. You're looking for confidence, joy, openness, and an almost dependency upon this person and a need for acknowledgement. Are their moods directly related to the leader? Of course, look for any of these signs in yourself if you suspect you have been brainwashed. This first step is often confused with normal friendships. This isn't the same thing as being friends with someone. They are seeking to control you and will speak of a bond deeper than friendship. For groups or institutions, they'll claim a level of mystery or legend and secret knowledge or divine origins, be associated with something or someone famous, a person or idea that calls to something generally intangible. To illustrate this example, the Catholic Church is one of the largest brainwashing institutions in the world right now. They say they are God's chosen people, sons of God, that everyone in the world is brother and sister. Their God became man, etc. This first step can be one of the most difficult to recognize, which is why it is so effective. It's easy to pull off, but hard to avoid. It's certainly easier to pick up on in an organization or institution than an individual. Seeing the second step may often bring to light that brainwashing is happening. Step 2. Building an unrealistic end goal narrative. Now that you have captivated someone or a group of people, you must reveal your goal or purpose. It is often something grand. Superlatives and extremes are used frequently. In religious brainwashing, failure is eternal suffering and damnation, while success is paradise and eternal reward. In terms of a country and its relationship to the populace, the notion of supremacy and a flawless history is driven in from a young age. The country will refer to itself as the greatest in the world. For someone brainwashed, this makes perfect sense. You are destined to be a part of this country or religious group because otherwise you wouldn't have been born into it or chosen. Aside from the ridiculousness of believing your existence correlates to some higher divinity or value, it is easy to become intolerant of other groups outside your own. Believing that a group or type of person is wrong, evil, gross, an enemy, inferior, based on their location of birth or biological or cultural upbringing is a very clear sign of brainwashing. Colonial Europe and America drove this narrative for hundreds of years, that they were saving the native savages from their barbaric ways. Still to this day, they teach that the white man civilized the world and led it out of the blackness of ignorance. specifically using blackness to prioritize skin color as having an evil or savage quality. That time period was one of the rare examples of a country's alignment with religious belief, called a theocracy. Theocracies are probably the most dangerous brainwashing force in the world, partly because of their efficacy and partly because of their aggression and violence. America today is still largely a theocracy, and it continues to extort other countries of natural resources and bomb any terrorist group trying to defend its people and land. To recognize this step on the individual level, look for someone claiming to be trying to change the world or make a difference or benefit humanity, take over the world, bringing a message from God or a higher power or an incarnation of a divine being. As most things, there are many fine lines between being a legitimate group and a brainwashing one. There are still groups, people, or religions that claim to have divine origins while not brainwashing. To check for this distinction, look for the next step. Step 3. Fearmongering and repression. This is when the rules and restrictions begin. On an individual scale, there must be right and wrongs. This is in order to create a reward-punishment system. Classical conditioning is one example of this. You will have habits. From those habits, you can create the rights and wrongs based upon that model. Recognizing this in someone, look for annoyances, dislikes, peeves, and even fetishes. Observing the person's mannerisms, you can deduce the rule system they create, which will be based on their personal quirks. Anger and punishment is usually followed by someone who disrupts this behavior. For larger scale examples, the threat of being conquered, damnation, sinning, ruining history, disappointment. The idea of having rules is to strengthen and demand loyalty. You do not want to be considered a criminal or a sinner or an evildoer. It goes against the step 2 end goal, meaning some great consequence will result if you break the rules. The very existence of laws only exists if everyone agrees that they do. There is so much brainwashing that the absence of laws is a foreign idea. There's an underlying brainwash that encapsulates most humans, and certainly defines our livelihoods, beliefs, and societies. It's the brainwashing that humans are a superior species and a more intelligent life form than the rest of Earth. Because we are superior, we need laws to stop us from being like roaming beasts. This, of course, makes little sense when you realize if you were actually superior to something, you wouldn't need made-up laws. Aside from science and most of human endeavor being oriented with the brainwashed mindset of obtaining some human utopian singularity of the perfect species, other examples of this step would include what's often referred to as the social contract, the dynamic between people and their rulers. Firstly, the very title of ruler should be a dead giveaway as to the controlling aspect of that person or government. Governments are such a unique brainwashing entity that a whole video could be dedicated to that alone. Just understand this. They fulfill every step, not to every person, but at some point in their formation, they fulfill the steps, and then society tends to carry out the rest. When natural processes and biology are claimed to be unseemly, unacceptable, or indecent, chances are there is some brainwashing going on. An example would be women, pretty much for all of modern history, doing literally anything. Step 4. We are the victims. It is us against the world, or us versus them. For the purposes of this step only, you are now a group, a collective. It is no longer leader and followers, but everyone together in us and we. This is where you have common ground. They are out to get you. Your goal from step 2 would be realized if only they were not attacking you. It doesn't matter that America has dropped 2 million tons of bombs on Laos during the Vietnam War, more than all the bombs in World War II combined. It doesn't matter that tens of thousands of civilians have been killed by the American military in the Middle East. It doesn't matter that America wiped out nearly 100 million indigenous people, stole their land, and is still continuing to erase their culture and their people. It doesn't matter that 2 Japanese cities were nuked, because America is still the victim from 9/11 and Pearl Harbor. Days celebrated much like holidays. This is what I mean by the fetishes from step 3. There's a perverse joy in claiming victimhood harder than anyone else. The Catholic Church has 2 billion followers, but still says the Muslims and Jews are going to take over the world. 2 groups which Christians have been persecuting for over 1,000 years now. For this step, it is important to be resourceful. Pay attention to the history, even on the individual level. They will say they were wrongly blamed, their reputation was ruined by a smear campaign, that you are the only person they have to believe them. It's a simple gaslight technique with the flair of revisionist history. Falling for this step and you'll do anything to protect the leader or the ideals, even to the point of violence if that's what it takes. This is, oddly enough, the only step that embraces an innate weakness. Usually that is covered up and hidden, but here it plays to empathy and sympathy. Really, the strategy is simple, but it's important not to use this step too soon. Pull this out too soon and you will appear insufficient, pathetic, and helpless. Even if you encounter conflict somewhere in the first 3 steps, you cannot break character. You must appear strong and unbreakable. It will add to your elusiveness and mystery. Experiencing strife and struggle together is the surest way to build a loyal bond. When someone is in your world, your belief, and you get attacked or insulted, your followers will see and experience that as well. But in their perspective, all they see is your end goal, and if they attack you, they are against the end goal, which means they are evil. Each step plays intricately into the other in multiple ways. Hopefully by now you are able to formulate the various strategies and methods people and businesses use. I encourage you to study these steps and see how relevant establishments in your life compare. Don't take everything I say as absolute. Learn for yourself. That's the best way to avoid all brainwashing. People believe what they want to believe, which unfortunately means breaking someone else's brainwash is nearly impossible, without at least hard physical proof, and even then the person have to decide for themselves if they buy it. Still, there are plenty of ways, but let's move on to step 5. Step 5. Money, sex, power, extortion. By now you are deep in. A sure sign of brainwashing is always going to be rampant sexual abuse, despite of course the laws and rules against that very thing that the person or groups say must be followed at all costs. We can see this in the Catholic Church and plenty of other Christian groups, as well as the U.S. government, where a majority of the U.S. presidents and other celebrities and aristocrats in the last 20 years had affiliations with Epstein and his island. But always in brainwashing, what you see is the accidental slip-up. The reality then is far more prolific. If a president or CEO or religious leader is involved, then you can bet everyone in the inner circle and many in the outer circle from there are involved as well. This step is very damaging, and by now you are very deep in. Not all are as physical and personal as abuse. Sometimes it is all your money or your time or your service. They may require a certain amount of money that is either not optional like taxes or demanded as tribute for the step 2 end goal or the fearmongering rules from step 3. An example being the weekly tithe churches ask for. There are plenty of examples from history and in modern instances too, of groups asking for money and in return the secret to happiness or even eternal salvation, like the indulgences churches used to sell. If loyalty has already been established, then you feel like you owe this person or group something. They have power over you at this stage. They may ask for the first 2 points in step 5 or just your labor and energy. Step 5 can lead to the permanent damage and irreversible belief systems. Not that it's impossible to heal or recover or open your eyes, it's just so ingrained that you often will go the rest of your life in this brainwash, fully believing everything. Step 6 is completing the brainwash. Step 6. The dissolution of individuality. If you are being brainwashed, when you get to this step, you are no longer you. You've become someone else. Reborn in this new system, oftentimes there's a specific ritual that is performed to signify this deepening of affiliation, which is really just full-scale brainwashing. Indoctrination can be a tricky thing. There has to be hints of this change from early on, references to a moment when great alteration must be made. The exchange of the old self for the new self. Name change is common. It could be a confirmation saint name like Catholics use. It could be a pet name, usually in the case of this sexual abuse from step 5. It can be a group identity rather than a personal name change, such as being a Democrat or a Republican. Certainly one of the most obvious, but no less effective, brainwashing scams in America and plenty of other countries as well is party association. There is a lie everyone believes that only members of these parties are qualified to rule, and that parties are diametrically opposed and that one half of the country is wrong. And if only they would all agree with you, then the end goal could finally be reached. Seeing the party system through this context certainly highlights the brainwashing of the government to its people. Party affiliation is a scheme. Most people in office have switched party association at one point in their career or another. There's basically an agreement of the government to monopolize rulers in order to maintain power and division of people, and therefore suppress individuality. Like I said, governments are a complicated instance, but just know that accepting a new or honorary name is not a good sign if the other steps have been carried out as well. The CIA studied mind control techniques for decades, and still do to this day. Their operation used to be called MK-Ultra, until information about it leaked and became declassified. The president at the time ordered them to reveal an acceptable amount of information on the practice and continue their work under a different name. One of their most notorious experiments involved trauma-induced personality disorders that the handler could impress whatever kind of programming that was desired onto the beta to create the alter. It's an example of the dissolution of individuality, and certainly the idea of trauma plays a big role in any kind of brainwashing. The repression, isolation, victim mentality, abuse of power, money, and sex paves the way for the full conversion. Being stuck in a single mindset will diminish neuroplasticity, the ability to be flexible and open to ideas and creative processes. You will be angry at anyone that questions or doubts you or your leader or group. You will often distance yourself from people outside your brainwashed group, and you are encouraged to do so, at least on a personal level. Everything, your whole purpose in life, the tiniest of actions, something as simple as walking, becomes a feat or act in honor of your leader or organization. Everything is offered to that, and anything not directly benefiting the group is a waste of time and should ideally not exist anymore. You will deny yourself simple things you used to like or things you'd normally want to try one day. You may become self-destructive because you will see yourself flawed and breaking so many of the rules. And the more you deny yourself something, the more you are tempted by it, and the more you will punish yourself for your weakness. You only see people in terms of being part of you or separate from you. Your perception narrows to a funnel. And then step 7 initiates. Step 7. Go forth and multiply. This is the call to action of the brainwashing. If up to this point all the other steps have gone through, perhaps so vaguely that you cannot tell if you are brainwashed or not, this last step will guarantee it is a brainwash if you see it. The moment you must spread your belief, to gather other lost sheep, to help other people find the way, to convert non-believers, to convince them to join your side. Whatever the particular vernacular used is, the leader will need more followers to grow. You are, after all, working to prevent people from damnation or ignorance or wrongness. It is your duty to help other humans by telling them they are making mistakes, breaking rules, hurting themselves and their soul and their conscience. Of course, if they still refuse, you can attack and insult them because they are against your goal, less than people. The aggressor is making you into a victim. Life becomes that, stuck in that brainwashed mentality, a cycle harmful to you. The 7th step is how you build an empire, amass a huge following, live on through generations, and secure your leadership for years to come. These 7 steps can easily have many extra steps in between. They can take on various forms and names, but as a baseline, this model is solid and effective for discerning brainwashing attempts. Certainly, if you are searching for signs or symptoms of brainwashing, that is a step in the right direction of escaping. Recognize yourself. Introspectively examine who you are now versus who you were before joining. If you were born into it, think from the perspective of someone born outside of it. Like, how would someone feel about this if they weren't a part of that group or belief system? Look at the groups that your brainwashing has demonized and denounced, and put yourself in a different perspective. Think critically. You didn't get to choose your birth or upbringing, and neither did anyone else. So how would your born into belief happen to be some uncorrupted truth and the answer to everyone's problems? The human mind, though capable of many talents and creative solutions, is frail and easily traumatized. Think through these steps and find your own examples. Brainstorm different methods in each of these steps that could be utilized both on an individual and group level. Account for variables and study either the leader or the followers, depending on your position. A lot rests on your ability to observe without commenting, using psychological subterfuge to influence people, rather than being straightforward. It's what happens in the unspoken conversations when real brainwashing takes place. In conclusion, humans are easily swayed, but adamantly loyal. Use this to your advantage.